Right. Doing due diligence or verify then trust the pre-sequel. Don't worry, that will be explained. It is only partly a Spaceballs joke. First of all, I'm going to ask everyone not to tweet about this, record it. You can take photos, but just hold them back until an unspecified later point. I have tried to anonymise this as much as possible, but there is an active media investigation going on into this, and there may be more coming out at some point in the future, and I don't want to jump the gun before that happens. I would also really like not to have someone threaten to sue me again. So, please feel free to talk about this in person, but nothing on media. For the guilty in this, the ones who were the culprits behind it, I'm not going to name them for hopefully obvious reasons, and I'm not going to name the victims because that is up to them. They can choose whether or not to disclose it or when to disclose it. I will say that they are fairly well-known people within the cybersecurity industry, and that's what makes this quite as bad as it was. Bit of background. Last year, I gave a talk about how to spot people using fake credentials. I did it under the name Dr. Rick Jennings, who is apparently a real person. I did not know that at the time. Working in AI ethics, which makes it worse. So, that Dr. Rick Jennings is a real person and works in AI ethics. This Dr. Rick Jennings was me, with a wool cap and clean shaven, which was really uncomfortable, and a fake book and fake credentials and fake name and everything. The organisers at B-Sides Kimbrough were aware of this, so I didn't actually commit fraud, hopefully. And I made up a bunch of stuff and claimed it was real, and then at one point during the talk I asked people, so who's read the book? And I had a couple of plants who said, yes, we have. And various other people said, yeah, I've read it. That's an important note. There was a story that inspired that talk. It didn't come from nowhere, shockingly. And as with so many of my stories, this starts with LinkedIn, because I don't talk to real people. One day I got a few notifications about some people I know starting new roles or having new roles added, and they were all joining this university. They were all professors of this university that I hadn't heard of. And I was a bit suspicious of it for various reasons. For one thing, I know how universities work and I know what these people do, and there's a bit of a disconnect. And for another, the first person who joined it some months before was someone I was already pretty suspicious of for various different reasons. So, can anyone here tell me, first of all, what's required for someone to call themselves a professor? Any?
Yeah, you just need to be a lecturer.
You don't need to be a lecturer. You don't need a degree. You don't need anything. You just need to put it in LinkedIn and say you're a professor. It is in no way a protected title. There is nothing about it that prevents someone from claiming, I'm a professor. Doctor is different. That is a protected title, and it is fraud by false representation to claim that you have a doctorate when you don't. But we'll get into the difficulties with that as well. Calling yourself a university is something entirely different. That is absolutely 100% fraudulent, unless you've been properly accredited, in most countries. So, I went and looked at it. This is not the real page, if anyone's wondering. And there they were, all listed as faculty of this university or graduate school, and proper bios, proper pictures. They'd obviously consented because they were adding it to their own profiles. And the weird thing is, I looked at the website and thought, I could have built that on GeoCities. For anyone too young to remember what GeoCities is, it looked like an 80s website. It didn't even look like they'd used WordPress. So, not what you'd expect from a university like the fictional NRU that I'm going to use. That is not a real university, just so I don't slip up and give away the real name. And yeah, they were all listed. They are all well known. They are people in fairly senior positions who you would expect to take care of their reputation. And to a point they did. But before we go into that, onto the university. So, website looks like it's something from the 80s. All right. What does a university campus look like? Well, it's got buildings. We're in one now. You know, you expect offices, you expect lecture halls, you expect all sorts of things. They've got a number of partner universities across the world, this NRU. They're accredited by an international accreditation organisation. They have all sorts of endorsements. Looks really good in terms of how credible they are. If they're not credible, surely they must at least be well-connected frauds who would go to some effort to make it look genuine. Now, I started searching, took 10 minutes, and I found their head office. That does not look like a prestigious university. It also doesn't look like a place where you would have 20 other companies registered, most of them in training and certification and financial auditing and gas and oil safety and maritime safety, and accrediting people to consult or be professionals in all of these areas. So there were a few more questions to ask at this point, in case you weren't wondering. Incidentally, one of the reasons I'm blocking out the number of the house and that I've not disclosed the place and don't want to talk about this is that's about 2 miles from where I live. And if they find out, then you never know. All of the partner universities I found were a similar setup. They weren't registered to the same place. They were registered in various other countries. Switzerland, one of them. Panama, a couple of African countries, a few Channel Islands ones, all sorts of other countries, all accredited by the same international body that accredits universities. So I did a bit more digging with that, and the accreditation body was accredited by, well, no one. There was no country who sponsored it. They just decided they were an international accreditation body, and they must be because they accredit all these universities. And their honorary president is on the faculty of most of these universities. What a coincidence. I also did a bit of digging on Companies House. Now, if you've not used Companies House, if you're ever looking into a business, go to Companies House. They list everything. Check the directors, check whether they've got shares issued, check the capital, check the registered office. That's the registered office. Incidentally, it's not listed for business purposes. Council would probably be interested. So I went through those, and these were people who, news stories have shown, have given doctorates to various politicians in various countries, which have been called out, surprisingly enough, by the media in those countries as a bit dodgy. In fact, apparently, the way you get a doctorate, and for all of you here who are interested in going postgraduate and potentially on to doctorate, highly recommend this route. It sounds a lot less painful. You pay £2,500 to one of these universities. You take a 2-day trip to Dubai for your doctoral seminar, and at the end of it, you get your honorary doctorate. That seems so much easier than 3 to 7 years. So yeah, if you're doing that, go for it. Also, they do masters as well, as do various others. You could probably get a degree from them, but they don't seem to go to that basic level for some reason. Back to my connections. Why weren't they asking these questions when they were joining this university? Because if a university is asking you to join and you're a professional with some experience around fraud and credibility, you should really be asking, are you a genuine institution? Now, I like these people, but there really isn't much of an excuse for not asking that. I did find the reason, and it's because of trust and misplaced trust. So the first person who joined has been using what I believe to be, from every investigation I've got, a fake title and fake claims of expertise for years. They have got a large number of high-profile media exposures from this. They have actually made their way onto advisory boards of companies, and they are still on them. Again, I'm not naming them because I don't want to be sued. Again. I spoke to the people I knew, because I did trust them, and said, there's something off about this. Now, to their credit, their immediate response was, we'll look into it, and then within about half an hour, going, oh, shit, this is bad. Now, within a day of that, they'd all removed that connection from their LinkedIn profile, and within another couple of days, they were all off the faculty website. Not one of them has yet publicly called out what happened, and I will admit I'm somewhat disappointed over that. It is entirely their choice. I can understand the embarrassment, but this is an organisation, and it seems to be an organised ring of academic fraud causing genuine harm by placing people who are unqualified in positions of trust, such as financial audit, gas and oil safety. We aren't talking, oh, you went and got a marketing degree and you can't actually do any design work or understand demographics. I mean, that's bad, but no one's going to die. If we're getting into financial auditing in certain countries, that is going to hurt people. That's going to hurt whole populations. If we're talking gas and oil safety and you're not actually qualified, people are going to die. So, yes, it's all a bit funny, but it has serious, real consequences. There are also some other questions. Now, this seems like a very sophisticated fraud ring in some ways, apart from, registering all of the businesses under the same people at the same address and all of those bits and not being able to hire a website designer. Why would they then recruit people who are in a position to do this sort of investigation or draw this sort of attention? Just to note, one of the people was extremely senior and high profile in the English legal system. These are people who should be asking questions, and frankly, if I was running an organised fraud ring, I would avoid them like the plague. So why didn't they? I've got a theory. I think it's because they're incompetent. Genuinely. If you peel away even the slightest bit of the charade they've constructed, it falls apart instantly. They have not gone to any depths. I could build a better organised fraud ring. If anyone wants to talk to me about that, we never spoke about it. But I'll meet you afterwards. So it was greed for the credibility and the profile because it legitimises their false doctorates. It was incompetence in not actually understanding anything about these people or what they do. And it was that trust. It was that one person again introducing them. So that mistake of trust went both ways. Now, funnily enough, after this, I was interviewing someone for a senior position, and they claimed they had a doctorate. It was not from NRU, so that's good news. I was curious because looking at it, they hadn't spent enough time to really get a doctorate, and the place they got their master's from was a bit iffy. It was an American unaccredited distance learning university. So I asked some questions and discovered a completely separate ring of fake universities. This one set up in France with multiple cases against it for fraud, which is still running. They're cheaper. It's 500 quid or 500 euros for a doctorate, and it only takes an hour Zoom interview where they assess your professional background and then say, yeah, you've qualified. So even easier route. As far as I can tell, this is basically a franchise model. This is a model for fraud that seems to be repeated. It's not rare. It is incredibly prolific. I managed to find 2 such rings, each of them with over 20 fake universities, ignoring the rest of the certification bodies they claimed to be, in just 2 years, when I wasn't even looking into another one. I just came across it. So there's a hub in France, there's a hub in the UK, guarantee you there's ones in America, I've seen some of them. It's not hard to investigate these. It's not hard to show that they are committing fraud. The politicians on the African continent who were named and shamed by media as having these fraudulent degrees are still in their positions. There has been no legal case brought because our legal system won't really care. And our authorities are not set up to investigate fraud of this level, this basic level. Everyone here knows how poor enforcement on fraud is in the UK. And that applies to things like this as well. Okay. Oh, it's also taken me 2 years to get any media attention on this, which is why I don't want to jump the gun. Because I've tried to get police attention, I've tried to get everything I can, and no one cares. I spoke to one TV channel who said, oh yes, Sky did an expose on that 5 years ago, so we can't do one. So, what are the red flags, the basic red flags? I mean, there's a lot of them. Firstly, unaccredited or accredited by unaccredited bodies. Now, this is an interesting one. The International Accreditation Body that I found shares its initials with a genuine accreditation body, which is a coincidence. I'm sure that's not deliberate. But go and look at their website. They've got hundreds of universities that they accredit. Brilliant. That means they must be good. Yeah? They say they've got all sorts of ISO standards. They say they've got all sorts of things. Not one of them bears out. There is no sign of them ever having been audited for any of these standards. And normally you'd at least put the logo in who audited you. And there is no national accreditation. No government has said, you can do this. Now, I understand everyone here is going to have big questions about the legitimacy of government, but there is a certain point at which you have to trust someone, and I would rather trust a government to say, yes, you're a university, particularly a government I trust, certain ones I wouldn't, than some nebulous accreditation body that floats around and says it's all international and high profile and shares its staff with most of the universities it accredits. Poorly designed websites. Seriously, fraudsters cannot hire good designers, at least this kind of fraudster. Everyone knows about the outage, everyone knows about the criminals and fraudsters who are putting up beautifully designed websites to catch people from that. These people aren't that good. Yeah, you could pop down the road and hire a design agency for 500 quid and get a better website. Fast track degrees. Now, it happens that sometimes people are caught by this and don't realise what the problem is because they don't understand how academic education works. So they think it's perfectly legitimate to say, I'm going to get a fast track degree and it will be based on my prior professional experience, and then I can say I've got a master's. And one of the reasons that works on people is because there is some truth to it. So unusually, I don't have an undergraduate degree. I do have a master's, and that's because the university accepted professional experience in lieu of having that undergraduate degree. They do that. But it didn't mean I can say I've got an undergraduate degree. It meant I could qualify to go onto a master's course, and there's a big difference. It still took me 2 years. I'm not bitter about that at all. I could have been so much faster. But yeah, fast track degrees and other certifications. We're not talking boot camp certifications here. We are talking, we'll fast track it for you. Who here has had the messages on LinkedIn saying we can get you Prince 2, PMP, CISP? Yeah. Same sort of thing. Unverifiable faculty with no academic records. This is a fun one. If you are a university and you have faculty, I can guarantee that somewhere there will be a journal article you've submitted or a paper online or some sort of sign of your research. If you are a professor with a huge profile, there should at least be some record of your doctoral dissertation somewhere. If there's not, ask questions. Lack of a campus and virtual offices. There are some lovely offices in London which also apparently belong to NRU. They are a virtual office, so I'm sure they've got a post box there. But their main headquarters is at the flat. It's even the contact address on their website. Low admission requirements. Mainly, yes, of course we'll take you on. Oh no, you don't need to show that you've done anything. Maybe you have to fill in a form. And this is my favourite one. This goes back to Verify Then Trust with Dr. Rick Jennings. Grandiose claims of credibility. If I have to prove so hard to you that I am credible, you should really start asking whether there's anything behind those claims. But there's more. So, you look them up and you see, yes, they've got academic papers under their name, they've got articles everywhere, all sorts of research that they've been involved in. It looks like really good stuff. And they're on the boards of 5 different think tanks. And they're a fellow of some cybersecurity authority. Yeah, I didn't say the right name by mistake. Now, on the paper side of things, who here has actually contributed to an academic paper or done any sort of publication of academic work? Okay, so a few of you will know that there's peer review involved, that there's quite a bit of work involved, that you will potentially be working with other people, co-authors. People sell co-author slots. This isn't even uncommon. It took me 15 seconds to find a whole Facebook group dedicated to calls for co-authors selling these slots for sponsorship or financial support of the research. Slight problem there. And that one's really quite difficult to deal with, because it may well be genuine research and unethical researchers trying to draw in some money from it. That one requires a lot more work in cross-referencing and saying, is this research legitimate? Has it really been done? You will find that a lot of the research that's got these calls comes from certain countries. I'll let you guess which ones. But that's okay. What about those think tanks? Those are serious bodies who do policy research and influence governments. Yeah. They must do some due diligence. They must consider things. Well, I've got a workshop which takes half a day where we can build a think tank, and it costs 99p. We have, in America in particular, think tanks sponsored by McDonald's and other companies campaigning against low wages. Sorry, minimum wages. We have other ones which are set up purely to sell fellowships and positions. There's actually a couple out there which openly state they are marketing companies and have people claiming to be fellows of those companies, like the cybersecurity agency I mentioned earlier. Certain people will know who on LinkedIn I'm talking about. So, fake tanks are a problem. So, what can we trust? Well, I do not recommend taking this approach, because I will tell you it gives you headaches. Montego is a fantastic tool, but at a certain point your eyes burn if you're working on your own on it. So do not go down this route. It's not worth the effort. Instead, and I'm sure Scott will like this one, talk to each other. Now that whole scenario at the start could easily have been avoided. And bear in mind, the person at the core of it, the person who betrayed trust on both sides, has been involved in the industry and with these people for multiple years. People have had questions about them and haven't spoken to each other because everyone's reluctant to just say, are we sure they're all right? We talk a lot about imposter syndrome, but we need to recognise there are genuine imposters out there. There are real people who are abusing the trust we have in the community to take advantage of it. And it's not just, oh, well, they got away with it. It's that these people are then in a position to cause real harm. If we're talking gas and safety, lives. If we're talking cybersecurity, lives depend on this. Possibly not as many or as directly in cybersecurity, but genuinely they do. So, we need to talk to each other. Gossip circles aren't great, but they do have a place. Webs of trust, networks of trust, reputation, discuss things. If you have a doubt, find someone you do trust and say, does this seem all right to you? We're a very supportive and helpful community. People will then come back and say, yes, that seems fine. Here's why it looks a bit odd. Or, no, there's some questions to be asked. Let's just quietly look into it for a bit. And maybe it will come back and your doubts will all go away and you'll feel a bit silly. Or maybe you'll uncover an international academic fraud ring. The other thing is, make sure you have multiple networks. It doesn't help to just talk to one circle. You need to be able to talk to others as well. If you've just got one monkey spear, you only get one banana. Speaking of talking to each other, there's contact details. Someone said that I was doing this to sell my book. I am. Now, are there any questions about any of this, apart from real names?
So at Company House, obviously people can seem pretty easy to register multiple businesses to one property. Why doesn't that get flagged up, especially when they're not commercial units or office locations?
Because Company's House has some of the worst security in company registration. Now, they are changing that. There is going to be an ID verification, so at least it will be real people, or people with fake IDs registering companies. Whether or not they're the people who are registering the company or they're just being blamed for it is a whole other discussion, but it's a step. But it is very easy to register fake companies to different addresses. It's also that if a premises isn't registered for business purposes, it doesn't mean it can't be the registered office of a company, because many companies, including mine, for example, do not have office premises. So there are reasons to use virtual offices. There are reasons to use residential addresses to run your business, because legally you have to be contactable, and that's the only thing Company's House care about. But if it's meant to be a large organisation and it's a residential address, that's when you really need to start asking questions. But the answer is, Company's House are really bad at verification.
The trouble though is that there are lots of agreements in place that make it easy to create companies, so you can't say you need to show a passport, because that then means that people from abroad might not be able to register a company.
But that is something they are going to be doing. So I don't know how they'll solve that, but I keep on being told by them, you need to now show ID. I mean, I've registered companies and it was so easy before, and now I have to give the government my ID, which is such a hassle. Can't register anything in Scott's name anymore.
How do you determine the legitimacy of an open online university?
If it's an open online university and a distance learning one, I would set the bar much higher than I would for anything that seems to have physical premises, because almost all of these are open online distance learning universities or fast track universities or similar. I've not found one yet that has an actual physical campus. So I would set the bar higher and say that's immediately suspicious, but open online ones do exist. Take the Open University. The Open University is accredited by the UK government. So that's a big clue that they've at least looked at them and checked they exist. But the answer is, it is just difficult at times.
How can you find out where universities are accredited?
They should state it. They should state very clearly who accredits them. If you ask them, they should say who accredits them. And if they've told you someone, you should be able to go to their website or to them and say, is this university accredited? That's the second step of it. Go and ask them. Incidentally, most of these don't even bother to actually verify that their students have received degrees. A few of them have a place where you can check references. Most of them don't even offer that service.
How many doctorates have you got now?
I plead the fifth.
Where's the money? So is it purely, are they just set, is it the $500? Is that all they're doing to make money, or is there another financial angle that this fraud ring is doing?
As far as I can tell, it's purely in the payment for the course. So it's kind of ambitious. I mean, if you consider what a doctorate costs or a master's costs, 500 quid is really disappointing. They could do so much better.
So some of the companies who does these dodgy things, they once they gather enough money, they usually sponsor big names in sports or some other fields, and that sometimes helps them to even prove their legitimacy even more. So, that makes this whole thing even more challenging.
Yeah, it gets worse every time you look deeper at it. The answer really is that authorities should be doing something about it. And again, it's not hard to investigate. I'm one person. Yes, I may have spent an excessive amount of time on it, but I am still one person with very limited resources.
Which authority should we expect to deal with this sort of thing?
Now, in this case, I would say we should be looking at legal authorities, so the police. This is fraud. It is in the Fraud Act. False representation, both by the individuals who do it and by the fake universities.
When do you expect a case to be made against this? When do you think it will?
A legal case, I don't think it will. So this fake university has been around for over a decade. The particular one that led me to all this, it would have been very easy to make a legal case at any point just by doing some basic research. The media series about it, I don't know, because some person called an election just as we were about to start that, and that threw everything into chaos. And then someone else went and released an update, which has made things worse. So I don't know is the answer to when this all goes public and appears on Panorama or something. It's not Panorama. I tried. So,
is there anything on the company's law that means that when people with those fake degrees get on influential positions in companies that makes that fraud as well? Is there something there that should force companies to do their due diligence?
in regulated industries, yes. However, when we're looking at regulated industries, they'll generally say appropriately qualified. Appropriately qualified, you can draw the line wherever you like, but you should verify that those qualifications are real. So the answer is, how long's a piece of string?
Have you got an idea that people are doing that, or did you just see, oh, that's fine?
Some companies may do that. I've had my own credentials checked more than once. I know that other people haven't, and I know that even when people who don't know to look beneath the surface go to the university website, and it's one of those that says, oh yes, well, if you want to check someone's credentials, just put the reference number they've given you in here and we'll verify them for you. They may not go further than that, or they don't go further than that. So I guarantee this is happening.
Stuff like higher rates and stuff like actually doing good. Like, are they just doing very service checks?
Yeah, background check companies do very superficial checks, unless you're going really deep.
Why do you think legal authorities aren't getting involved?
Because it's fraud, and it's complicated, and it's not exciting, and there's other targets for them, and it's not what the public are crying out about, is my best guess. When we look at the funding for fraud enforcement, I think it's about 1% of policing budgets and about 40% of crime. And what they'll really be going after first is the stuff, or should be going after first, is the stuff that affects individuals. What they generally go after first is the stuff that affects companies. So this is way down the bottom of the list.
Have you seen some companies that set themselves up like this and then try to get government funding and succeed?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That would be some of the fake tanks, for example, which get government funding. I mean, there are genuine think tanks. I'm sure I'll come across one day. But many of them are just trying to get corporate or government funding for their research because they're pushing an agenda and their research is not in good faith.
Can I just add, it's not just about research. When you said about gas, I know people have told me about companies in London, about education, foreign, language schools for years, because I'm a foreigner myself. Yes, and they get funding, and the people pay, and it's all fake, and it's like, yeah, we tick in the box for, so there is actually corruption going very high up, so that's why it's not in the it's not in the favor of the government, because somebody's actually having their pockets full. So why would they investigate something like that?
But we do now have a lawyer in charge, so fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, it's much bigger than
Oh, yeah.
what you just said. The rings are much bigger, and why would they spend money on something that they'll get affected at the end of their life? So.
I know this is in particular to degree and doctorates and stuff, but do you see the same sort of stuff with smaller certifications and particularly around, I know that there's so many coding schools now. How do we verify that those are actually...
Right. So let's do security boot camps, because I know that's a controversial one. Many of them are not completely fraudulent, but are extremely superficial. However, there are genuine ones out there, and the answer to how you tell the difference is you pay the money, and if it works for you, it was probably a good one. And if they make grandiose claims of how you will come out of their 2-week course with £72,000 per day, it's probably not one that you want to go to, even if it's government funded. Same with coding camps and things. There is a genuine need for these programs. They can really turn people's lives around. Don't throw stones. I work with one called Caps Lock. They are genuine. They are good faith. Yes, they have failures. They have successes. There's a mix of things. It works for some people. It doesn't for others. But I helped write the curriculum for them. I know it is tough. I know it is intense. And there are good ones out there. There are also very, very bad ones out there. And telling the difference is really tough, except if you talk to each other and get to know people involved with the different ones and who've been through them and ask them what was the experience like. It has to be that communication, that web of trust. It doesn't work any other way.
Who do you want you to play you and the ITV documentary?
I don't want to go to the ITV studio because it's huge and green and weirdly disorienting. I was there yesterday, it was horrendous. Jason Statham, he shares
Do you know where we can find a sort of a big list of professional bodies or accreditation authorities that we can trust?
No. The reason for that is it doesn't exist. Who here knows about ISO 27001? Okay. Who can accredit people to audit for ISO 27001 and certify companies that they are compliant with it? Anyone? Anyone. Anyone who says that they can. And there's little you can do about that. The only thing that can happen is they get a bad reputation, and then when you present the certificate with their company logo on, the customer doing their due diligence says to you, yeah, but I've heard about them. Why don't you go and get someone more reputable to do it? The answer is governments do have lists of actual genuine accreditations for things like universities where it's legally protected, but for pretty much everything in cybersecurity, with I believe one exception, there is no legal authority behind it. It's purely commercial, it's purely reputation based. No one told ISC2 you're allowed to issue the CISP and take over the world with it and convince everyone they need it for entry level roles. But this is another reason I don't want it broadcast. But the answer is it is really difficult unless you're dealing with something that is a specific regulated area.
Slightly spicy question. Will this be fixed by a security council?
Like, I don't think that's a particularly spicy question. I would say there are, I hate to say this, there are potential benefits to some of the things they are doing, because chartership does have legal protection, and that means it is regulated, it is very publicly verifiable. Now, the fact that they've decided to charter a specialist cybersecurity register That's a whole different discussion, and I won't talk about it in a large public space because I will get very angry, because I believe you only need one for security. You don't need to split it into 50 areas. As you can see, I'm getting angry. So there is some work there which could potentially help, yes. Whether it will or not is a very different question, and that's all about how it's used and recognised.
So regulation isn't likely to have enough teeth to address this. Could cyber insurers start to question people's qualifications and refuse to pay out if companies are hiring without due diligence?
I have been trying to talk to cyber insurance companies for some years now about how they are in the perfect place to make companies do the work to protect themselves. Sadly, I've been through cyber insurance audits. ISO 27K is harder. Cyber Essentials is harder than some of them. So
if they've got an incentive not to pay out, is that not enough of a...
Yeah, but that's why they have clauses. The answer is yes, I really hope they do, and they can. They are in a position to do it. But until they do it, I won't believe that they will.
Until they do it, no one else is going to notice.
You mentioned obviously the legalities of saying you need to agree and whatnot, but what's the law in terms of the person actually getting these degrees? Like, if they have a genuine belief that this is a legitimate degree, like where does the law land on like what kind of due diligence the person needs to do?
Fraud does not require intent. So, yes, they would have to be considered grossly negligent in terms of they would need to be reasonably capable of detecting, I've not really got a degree. I don't believe that's ever going to come up in court, because I think in the case where someone's got a fake degree and doesn't get a job because of it, no one's going to take each other to court. These things do happen, and there does need to be forgiveness. It's the people issuing it who are the problem. But actually, having said that, recently in the States, we've had cases of stolen glory, which is taken very seriously over there. Now, in that case, it was malicious, but there are instances where people just harmlessly exaggerate or misremember or things like that, and there have been consequences to that as well. So, maybe.
We had a good seminar before about OPSEC, and like from the logistical point of view, is it really just one person with a laptop in the suburbs, or how many people does it take, or how it's from a logistical point of view, how much resources does it take to run this?
So, looking at it, I mean, with NRU, let's take that one specifically. Now, what they have is 3 directors. 2 of those are father and son, as far as I can tell. So it's a family business. I support family business. They have to organise annually conferences in Dubai. Now, yes, that's difficult. It takes some resources, but it's not that difficult. I've organised conferences. I mean, people here have organised conferences. It can be done. It can be done with a very small team, particularly when you've got a load of people who are very self-impressed with their new professor titles, willing to take an all-expenses-paid trip to do the talk for you. You could do it with one person.
Yeah, because, like I said, during the seminar, it was like all encrypted, burner phones, high security. But if you're saying nobody's coming after them, it's really just literally person with a phone and a laptop.
This is one of the problems that we have in cybersecurity. We like to fetishise OPSEC and say the criminals are amazing at it. And in some cases, yes, they are. There was EncroChat, I think. Now, that was a case where, okay, they proved not to be so good at it, but they were trying to be sophisticated. But the vast majority aren't. The vast majority don't know or care about encryption. The vast majority don't know or care about dead drops and encrypted channels and shell companies or any of this stuff. They just set up something and plod on.
Okay, that's...
I think we might be coming to time. One more.
Going back to the start, when you mentioned that you did a talk under fake credentials, how can we trust you?
talk to each other. Some of you here know me, or think they do. That's the answer. I mean, I could say I am actually chartered, so there is a public register sponsored by the government with my name on it, saying that I am credentialed as a chartered security professional. Definitely nothing to do with my dislike of the chartered cybersecurity professional register coming in. So there is that. There is something publicly verifiable. There is work online that I've done. There are talks online that I've done. There are people who know me. But most of it is talk to each other.
Anyone trust James?
No.
And on that note, thank you.